Mr. Deakins.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, my name is Homer Deakins, and I am appearing today on behalf of COLLI, which is the Council of Labor Relations Equality, which is a trade association consisting of chief labor relations executives from Fortune 500 companies. With respect to this particular question, the written statement of position, I ask what I think is obvious. Why is it that we are trying to fix something that is not broken? I have been practicing law before the board for over 50 years. When I first started practicing, in our case hearings, the record was sent directly to the board at the close of the hearing. The average time for the petition to the election was 82 days. In 2010, the average time between petition and election was 31 days. And this is incredible to me, that in more than 90% of cases, elections occur as a result of the parties consenting to the terms of the election, eliminating the need for any hearing. The board's R-case procedures are working better today than ever before, and this is happening without any rulemaking changes. The proposed rule requires that the employer provide a detailed and comprehensive statement of position within 7 days or less. This is especially egregious for small employers who must first go out and hire a lawyer or hire a consultant and educate its management on the whole process. The rule says that any issue not formally addressed in the statement of position will be waived, and the employer will be precluded from introducing any evidence or cross-examining witnesses. So the statement of position not only presents a substantial burden, it also carries serious consequences. Is this better than informal discussions between the hearing officer and the union and the employer? My experience has been that issues come up through these informal discussions and during hearings that the parties never thought of, and the parties work those issues out without any formality. Open discussions without penalties usually result in consents. By imposing waivers, the board is encouraging employers to be more inclined to include all arguments and all positions versus trying to work out issues. The board is forcing employers to focus on protecting and preserving their rights, dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, rather than working out an election agreement. In 7 days or less, you cannot do both. Under the board's proposed requirements for a burdensome statement of position, I predict that conducting 90% of elections based on consent will become history. On much of the information required, I ask the question, do we really need the information now? The employer should not be required to identify and concede the appropriateness of the unit before hearing any testimony that's been taken at the hearing, especially in the face of the new standards for unit appropriateness in specialty health care. The proposed rules require an employer to submit the names of all employees in the petition for unit to all the other parties, and a list of the regional office which contains home addresses, email addresses, and telephone numbers. Why do the parties need names? Issues of eligibility are determined on the basis of job classification and not names. Why must the employer be burdened with providing even more details to the region, which have nothing to do with eligibility? Can't these things wait until the Excelsior list is filed? The rule imposes requirements such as stating a position on the polling places, the times for the election, and so on, before the unit has even been determined. These issues are now easily handled after the decision and direction of election without any delay. Why do we have to put these things ahead of the hearing? And some of the information that's being required in the statement of position is not information that I, as a lawyer, would gather before the hearing. I don't need to know the names of all of the employees in the unit. I don't need to know the date of the election and where the polling places are going to be before I go to a hearing. That is information that I don't need that would be included in a statement of position before the hearing. Assume an employer acts in good faith in not including certain information in the statement of position. Is the statement of a position a straitjacket? Or would it be fairer to say that the employer would be permitted to make amendments to the statement unless there was an absence of good faith involved?
You're out of time. Would you like some more time?
Thank you. What assurances do we have that confidential information furnished in the statement will be held in confidence? The rule provides no such assurance. The requirement of a statement position is one of the most burdensome requirements in the proposed rule. In 2011, when this same proposal was advanced, the board wisely determined to leave that proposal out of the final rule, and I would urge the board to do the same thing in this case. Thank you.
Mr. Deakins, it's good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Isn't it the case that under current practice, the employer supplies to the board a list of names and classifications in advance of the Excelsior list so that the board can administratively determine whether or not the showing of interest is in compliance with the standards?
They may or may not.
I don't understand that.
The board, as I understand it, it is the option of the employer to submit such a list to the board to check the showing of interest.
Right. And in your
and in many instances, that is not done.
Okay.
I mean, if I've had an election campaign going on for 2 years in a unit of 2,000 employees, I may very well not take the option of checking the showing of interest because I probably have a pretty good idea that they have more than 30%.
Okay.
It's not a requirement. And that list, of course, would remain confidential with the board. It would not be made available to the union. Under this rule, the union can get the list of names of employees and then withdraw, and there is no penalty, and that list is not returned. The union organizer has a list to work from for the future.
Now, with respect to names versus classification, there are circumstances, and it has been argued that classifications are sometimes terms that are different with respect to what the employees understands themselves to be and what the employer defines them to be. And if classifications are supplied without names, isn't there a disconnect with respect to whether or not the bargaining unit is the same group of people that everybody is trying to discern?
Well, you speak of a very, very rare situation that might come up. But if you produce the classifications at the hearing, in 99% of the cases, why do you need to know the names of the people who are in that classification? If the unit is a production and maintenance unit in an industrial plant, you never even usually get into a discussion of the classifications. You have the production groups. You don't go into the classifications. They're all production and maintenance employees, and you don't have to develop that type of information. I think what you speak of is an extremely rare situation. But to think that you need the names of employees for the purpose of the hearing is just something that I've just never run into.
Okay.
I have just one follow-up. And again, I'm not asking you to endorse this approach, but similar to the question I asked before, if we would treat a position statement in a manner more similar to the generalized way that we have treated written grievance and grievance and arbitration procedures, would that be an improvement in your view over the approach that's reflected in the current proposed rule?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Really quickly, this is following up on your 2014 written comments, specifically page 10. It relates to access to counsel, basically access to counsel if you are faced with a petition, and how the persuader rule may or may not work out. Is it your position that we should, or the position of the parties that you represent, that we should hold this in abeyance to basically see how the persuader rule works out, to see what the market impact is on the Management Defense Counsel with some competence and experience in the United States?
That makes all kind of sense to me.
Okay.
I'd like to follow up on what you just said to Member Mismara, that I think it was to him, that you had never, in your experience, been required to provide the names or job classifications. And I'm asking you that because I'm curious about that, because it is in the best practices that was produced by the committee that included regional directors and so on in the late 90s. But you're saying that that's never been implemented in your experience.
It hadn't been my experience, no.
Okay. But it apparently was suggested, I guess, 15 years ago.
My experience, frankly, is I can't remember the last time I've been to an R case hearing and that I have not been able to reach a consent. And I think that largely happens because of the informality, where the hearing officer is the voice between the union organizer, the union lawyer, and the management lawyer. And they work through the issues informally, much better than they're going to if an employer has to make these ironclad positions in a written statement.
And
that's going to almost force you to go to the hearing.
And are the steps normally reached at the hearing, before the hearing?
Most of my steps are reached before the hearing.
So within some period before, I don't know what time your hearings normally are, but with some time under that hearing date schedule.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I can't remember the last time I went to an R case hearing.
So somewhere between 7 and 14 days you're reaching a step.
Right.
And then the parties basically are closing down all the other issues.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It is lunchtime.